Variables are used to store volatile information of a specific data type. You'll see that we use variables to hold information and to pass information between different functions. To use variables, you have to first define them. So here we'll just put together a little main block, and we'll define a function by giving it a variable by giving it a name, int1, and defining its data type. Now there's more information in the data types video about all of the valid data types, but typically things like integer, character, time and date, etc. Now you can also define variables to be data typed like the column in the database schema that's being used. Here we're going to define a third variable called phone1 that is like or typed like the customer.phone column as found in the schema. Now in order for this to work, of course, we need to identify in the module the schema that is being used. And we'll also just need to fix a comma there after character 25, since we're listing each of these variables in turn. So again, we can use the like keyword to define the variable like it's defined in the database schema. Now let's go ahead and look over in the Tools Database section and take a look at the database browser and see how that is defined. Now the benefit of doing this is that if the underlying schema changes, you don't have to redefine the variables that you're using for those values in the database. So here we see the phone is a character length 18, and in my code here I'm defining phone1 to be used and typed just like the customer.phone column. You can also define groups of variables into a single record. Here we'll go ahead and define a new record. We'll call it rec1, and we'll define some variables within it. Notice that we're using both standard data types as well as the like keyword for typing that third variable, just like the customer.zip code. We've also included the record as part of the define list. So at the end of the record definition, we've placed a comma, and then we can continue with our other standard variables that we want to include. Now, the way that you use an individual variable from a record is to use the notation record name dot variable name, just as we've done here. With the let statement, you can assign values to your variables. Here we'll assign a value to a character variable, and if we wanted to assign a value to a record variable, we would again just use the notation record name dot variable name. Another statement used with variables is the initialized statement. So here, instead of letting rec1.var2 equal 7, we'll go ahead and initialize it. Or initialize everything in the record to null. So using the dot star notation allows us to identify all of the variables in that record and initialize them to null. We could also initialize them to some default values as well. Here we're also letting character 1 equal the value of rec1.var1. So another way that the let statement is often used. A last statement to look at is validate, and validate will check to see if the value of your variable is in the include list for that field. So in the schema, you'll have an include list sometimes for valid values for a particular variable, And here we're validating rec1.var3 like customer.zip code. So we're going to check to see if the value of var3 is valid given what has been listed in the include attribute for the customer.zip code column.